All right. I'm ready.
Oh my goodness. So, Lisa, I had a question. We were talking about this earlier, and we thought it might be good and helpful to record it.
Mhm.
But as a publisher, what do you tell writers to expect during the publishing process once they've finished their book and send it to you?
Yeah, I don't really tell them anything. I just rope them and then suck them in. No.
I know that's wrong. I know that's wrong. You are always so helpful and so supportive. So I think it's helpful if writers who are watching you and following you on Facebook and anticipating, hoping to write something, if they know what to expect, that might be helpful.
Yeah, now it's different with every publisher. In fact, the publishers that I have worked with, what they do is you send them your script and they format it and get it ready, and then they send you, that final draft, what do they call it? It's the final script. And then you have to approve that, and any notes that you have to be written out very cleanly and clearly. So they get that and they make the changes, and that's it. But that's not how I do it, because I am first a writer. I think in terms of like how would I want to be involved in the process, or sometimes not. Some writers have told me I don't want to do anything until the very end, and that's fine too. But how I normally work it, and because this is your book, Karlie Saumier, Wheels Off, and you've got another one coming up, Trunks Up, which will be out in the next 6 weeks or so. But I know when you and I were working on that book, there was so the publisher with children's books that have illustrations, they're putting together your illustration on one page and writing on the other. Or in the case of Amy's book, these beautiful watercolors.
Those are gorgeous. Wow.
Amy Simpson's written a book called Jeremy Plays the Blues. Now, in this case, I'm scanning the whole thing, and this is going to be the actual book.
Wow.
And then the words are going creatively on here in a way that the eye will be able to follow,
That's amazing.
But I was working on her book yesterday, and when you've got the illustrations and you're laying the text onto it, it's amazing. The text is going to change. It's like theater. It's collaborative.
Yeah.
So you're looking and you're bringing together two art forms, the written word and art. Mm-hmm. And inevitably it's going to change when the two collide, right? So when we were doing your book, Wheels Off, there was that, you have to lay the pictures next to the text.
Yep.
And suddenly you realize in some cases, what text is not covered, or because you see the story or the finished piece coming together. Mm-hmm. And I know you had to do a rewrite on the sister, Hazel.
Yeah.
The sister to Henry, when she does that wheelie to stop the bullies from pursuing her little brother. She does a maneuver with her bike, and you, as the writer, you had to go back in there and you had to not rewrite that, but write a whole new paragraph describing what actually took place there. And we didn't know that until the publication process of when the interior of the book was being created.
Yeah. So
I tried to involve the writer in every step, because ultimately, it doesn't say by Karlie and Lisa, so ultimately you're responsible, because people that read this, you are responsible for the story. And I've got to have your back. I have to have the author's back. So it's a back and forth collaborative effort, mostly between the writer and the publisher. But sometimes if you needed another illustration, you'd have to involve the illustrator as well. But I think, you know, when you and I were talking today, we were talking about some writers think it's over when they hand it over to the publisher, but it's, if you can look at, as an author, if you can look at it as this is now being elevated to the next step.
Yeah.
I'm still going to be involved in the process, but in a little bit of a different way. It's like writing a play and then the play getting produced and the director saying, hey, cast, would you like for the playwright to be involved in this production? Yes, we would. Well, let's fly her in. Well, you're sitting there in the theater, but the director's got it. You sit there and it's a whole new role. You know, you can't get up and start directing. It becomes collaborative, and you begin to be sensitive to what the expectations are of the cast and the director, because it's not, you know, it's their show. You just wrote it. They can't change the words, but you can't think that you're going to, you know, make a big thing about it. So in that way, it's the same with the author of a children's book or any book that's illustrated, really. When it comes together, elements change, you know, just like when you add actors to a play. But so the author has to be ready to possibly rewrite, add more, be willing to cut according to the editor / publisher.
Yeah, and what the need is for that particular book and the layout that you put together, right?
Yes, if you're truly pursuing excellence as an artist, you will always be quick to listen to somebody who might have some great input on your product, you know. So, and that includes editor, publisher, interior designer the designer of the interior of the book. But as we were saying, once that book, you know, in my opinion, once the book gets published, let it go.
And that's the hard part, because I think after the process of working through the book, and you and I found this with Wheels Off in that one little section, I rewrote that one little section, but it didn't even dawn on me, or us, I think at that point, to change the illustration. You know, so in the back of my mind, I'm like, oh, yes. I've got to be better prepared, you know, for that process in knowing what to expect. And you are so great about walking writers through that, but knowing that it's okay to change things, to move things around. That's okay.
Yeah, Melanie Eubank wrote a book called Ella's, what's the rest of that? I can't think of the name of it.
Ella's Crazy Adventure. Yeah.
Yeah. Ella's, Great Adventure, Melanie Eubank.
Yes.
But anyway,
wonderful book.
In her case, right, you're seeking excellence. In her case, that part of the process involved her asking the illustrator to do 2 additional illustrations. And what's so funny about that, this is why it's so important to keep open when you're seeking excellence, right? So I'm not excellent. I'm not perfect. I'm not excellent. I'm seeking excellence in the work that gets created through me.
Yes.
You know, so if you know that you're not excellent, that you're seeking it, then you're open, you know, to hearing something wiser than you when it comes your way. She got the 2 illustrations done, and one of them ended up being the cover of the book.
Oh my gosh.
You know, like, so I don't know what would have been the cover. You know, so that's an example of like, trust the process. And, you know, I tell writers too that I have like this really weird belief that it's not cause and effect, it's effect and cause. So the effect actually already exists.
Interesting.
So if that's the case, a book that you're writing already exists on some level, and that's how you know you're working your way toward finding that book. It's a strange way of looking at it, but it really helps me, because if I sense something is missing, something is, and I trust that. And then there's a calm feeling when it's implemented. I get calmer.
Yes. I think I had a better sense after the second book in taking ownership of what I could control on the front half. And when I handed it to you, I'm like, okay, I'm ready for the next step. Whatever's next, I'm ready for it. And I think you just do such a great job in helping writers understand that when we're going through your workshops and taking your workshops, because they're just phenomenal. They really are.
Thank you. I love writers, love writers. They're my tribe. They are my tribe. And a lot of you guys are theater people, so you understand the importance of action in a book, which gives you your illustrations. You know, action is what drives theater. And of course, it's the written
And
word.
real life.
And real life, yeah. If I sat here and did nothing, my life would have no fruit. But anyway.
Like me, who can't write conflict for the life of me unless I like shove down right down the middle and saying, okay.
Yeah. You're not alone. And I think that's a good problem to have, because your tendency is to be a person of peace. So you, Karlie, I've known you a long time. You know, you seek peace in your life and you try to make peace in relationships, but that's not the way it needs to happen. And, you know,
I hadn't thought about that. I
Yeah.
hadn't thought about that.
You know, and you can write a problem that's not a problem between two people. It can be a problem that two people have to solve, and that's still equally as important. So conflict can be conflict within, or conflict against nature, or
External.
Cancer,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
sickness. Sometimes conflict that is with something inanimate can become a conflict relationally. And that makes it interesting too. Like sometimes when people are sick with cancer, it can then create conflict, you know, in the relationships around them. I just heard this horrible story about a guy that was sick and his wife left him. I can't remember.
I hear that a lot, and it's crazy.
But you can't really judge it because you don't know, you know, I guess what you
choose. Yeah.
But I want to write that, you know, I want to write that because that's interesting. How did that play out?
Yeah.
But anyway, the thing to remember that's really important is that when the book gets published, when it goes to print and it's published and you get your copies in the mail, you got to then let it go. That's when you let it go. Now, is it perfect? No. Is it excellent? Well, you can look it over and decide for yourself. Changes could possibly still be made at that point, but something people don't think about is you got to decide what kind of writer you are. You know, are you going to be a writer that writes A River Runs Through It, which I believe is the only novel he wrote, you know, or are you going to be a writer that has just a ton of material? Well, in your case, Karlie, you know, you've got The Adventures of Hazel and Henry, and it's a book series. This is 1 and 2 is going to come out in the next couple of months. And, you know, this story and these characters will be continuing to live in your head. And as I advise people, when you write the 3rd and the 4th, I would advise you to start reading this one from the beginning, read the second one before you sit down to write the 3rd. So it will continue to live in your head, but this you got to let go of.
Exactly. And that's an important step. That's an important last step, I think, so that you can free your mind to move on to the next story that you want to write, that you want to share.
Yes, because if part of you's still there, it won't fully be in your next project. I talked with a writer the other day about the stovetop. I call it the stovetop mind control. And you've got to, when you're currently working on one book, that's on the front burner. You've got to move those other ideas on the back burner. They'll bombard you. Don't let me go. Don't let me go. No, I'm just going to put you over here. Otherwise, people, they talk about writer's block, but most of the writers I work don't have writer's block. They have writer's overwhelm. They are bombarded with ideas, and you can't survive that. You'd go nuts, so you really
just have to simmer in the background.
Right. Stove top. You move it to the front. It's like with publishing. Yeah. I just sent Gail Childress Green's new book. It's called Because You Are Mine.
Oh, Because You Are Mine. She's got some good ones. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Another one coming out in the fall. But, I just sent that off to be printed and released on Amazon and Barnes and Noble and all of those platforms. But, and now I'm moving on to the next one. So the writer now is being brought in. This book now, Jeremy Plays the Blues, is moving to the front burner. And now I've got to let, and I haven't even opened up your file for the sequel of this yet, because I don't want it on my front burner.
Oh, that's a great analogy though. And that's a great physical thing you can do with your brain to say, you know what? No, it's on simmer for 2 more weeks until I need to bring it to the front burner and turn up the heat.
I really want to write a book about the 10 top successful habits for a writer. One of them would be how to control your mind. Your brain is such an asset, but it can become damaged and overused and exhausted and mistreated if you don't know how to do these things. And creative people's minds, it's really about self-control.
It can be the biggest challenge.
Yes.
It's getting past some of that.
And I meet a lot of writers that.
What's that book title? I want it.
Yeah.
You gotta write it.
All right. It's a good idea, I think, because
very good.
We can, our minds can focus on 10 things.
Yes.
That's why all the books, and a lot of the sermons, it's like these 3 things, these 4 things. Keep people like their brains work. Most people's brains work in an outline type thing. Yeah. But back burner, front burner, off the stove entirely. I said to this writer, get in the back seat. I said to this writer the other day, off the stove. Off the stove. Not even in the oven.
That's when it goes into the bookshelf, like behind you, and it's done.
Yeah. I mean, think about it. Some of these I wrote, a lot of them are my, Climbing Angel writers, but if I kept all that in my head, I'd lose my freaking mind. Once they're published, I'm thinking of promoting them and selling them. I'm not thinking of, maybe way off in a distant galaxy,
a book gallery. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, you don't want to lose your mind. One thing at a time. They did those tests about, what is it called? When you do lots of things, women are better at it than men because we've got the synapses that are able to go back and forth.
To compartmentalize?
Yeah, that too, but it's being able to multitasking.
Oh, multitasking, yes.
And they've discovered that we're not good at it, that you don't do good when you're doing a ton of different things. Focus on one thing at a time.
That makes sense.
Yes.
But when it's done, it's done.
Yeah, you can be writing 3 books though. So for the first 3 hours, you work on the first book, but you've got to think it through and not allow it all in your mind at the same time. Because especially if you're going to write a plethora of books over your career, you'll lose your mind.
That makes sense.
All right, we talk forever.
I can't believe it. When we get together, it's like 3 hours later, so we won't go on any longer. But I thought those were important questions that other people might find helpful as they go through the writing process too.
Yeah, they're awesome. Let me just, we'll stop for now. And if we come up with another question, we'll go back. Thanks, Karlie.
Love you. See you later.